Welcome to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, folks. It is your favorite Serpentine siblings, Brothers of the Serpent podcast. We are here in our 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high up on the Edwards Plateau. Last week, we were totally astonished to find out that our podcast had gone all the way to 11.
Whoa.
And so we are on episode 12, and 12 is a great number to get into some serious geometry. So...
It's 2 6s.
So that's what we're going to do. We have a couple of interesting topics to discuss tonight, and
The rest is boring.
the rest is very boring. Is there is there anything in the news you want to bring up, anything like that, before we get into the serious topics?
Nah, if I did that, I'd talk my ass off.
Oh, right.
So
There's
let's
some
just
new
skip
stuff,
that.
but I don't think I want to save it for next time. No flat earthers, though. Thank God.
Yeah. They're there every day.
Oh, I know what it is.
Every time the world revolves, the flat earthers are there.
That's right. They're correct twice a day.
Stupid flipping coin flat earthers.
Like a broken clock. There is something we need to talk about, though, briefly, at least a little bit, because we did this for the show, which was the day trip.
Oh, yeah.
I knew there was something besides...
Me too. Yes.
Yeah, I was like, what am I forgetting here?
Yeah.
So we decided, or Kyle brought this up.
I wanted to do a field trip. I was tired of being an armchair theorist. I wanted to get out there in the world and really look at some cool shit. So,
And he was like, let's go get some ammo for our armchairs.
yeah. So I initially tried to look up some ancient, human stuff, or giants, or whatever, petroglyphs, and I was also wanting the trip to be a day trip, like something we could do in one day and have plenty of time to look around. So as it turned out, I found a volcano.
Right. And we were in Central Texas, and we're like, what?
Yeah. An extinct volcano that was like 2 hours away. So we were like, let's do this. And we drove up there to check it out, and it is called Pilot Knob Volcano.
Yeah. And it's not, is it called Volcano still?
Yeah.
Okay. Because it's not.
I mean, it's not a volcano, but it
It
was.
hasn't been a volcano in a long, long time.
But you can actually look it up on Google Maps, Pilot Knob.
Well, I'll have
Volcano.
pictures of it in the show notes, too.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, yeah.
It says Pilot Knob
Pilot Knob.
Volcano. So we go up there, and it's all on private land, and we drove around it and went down various roads and
We navigated it
driveways.
3 times and then found the entrance.
And yeah, I went and knocked on somebody's door. They didn't know anything about the volcano that was right behind them.
Yeah, we're like, you guys know there's a volcano right there? We're like, no, get out of here.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, we're doing a research project on volcanism, and we'd like to go explore that extinct volcano behind you. And the guy was like, I don't know anything about that.
Volcanoes ain't extinct, get out of here.
Well, do your neighbors know anything about that? I don't know, my neighbors have just moved here. Oh well.
Yeah, the Austin populace was massively unhelpful.
Yeah. But there was a nearby park called McKinney Falls.
Yeah.
And we were like, it's really close to this extinct volcano, so we're like, surely there will be
Somebody there will know.
something there, and somebody might know something there. And when we were on our way there, we were going up a hill that was possibly part of this volcano as well. And there were some huge boulders on the side of the road.
There was a sign that said historical marker. We were like, where's the marker? Where the fuck is the marker?
Yeah.
So I pulled over into the first, driveway entrance we saw, which was gated. Just stopped right there. But then we saw these huge boulders. Amidst the stinky, gourd plants that are out.
Yeah. God.
They smell terrible.
But yeah, so we tromped through the stinky gourd to these big boulders that were not limestone, and sure enough, they were very porous. They looked frothy.
Yeah.
And there were weird red crystalline formations on them and some quartz pockets, like geode pockets around them.
Yeah, pictures in the show notes again on this stuff.
Yeah. So we got some of that. And then
every you got to realize that like every rock, everywhere in the area we live, is either limestone or flint.
Right.
If it's not one of those, it was brought in by somebody ordering gravel.
Or a volcano.
Or there's a volcano. But there's no volcanoes except for this one.
Oh, there are some weird spheroid things.
Right, those come from space, didn't they?
Right, they came from space. Anyway, so we walked around, looked at those boulders for a while, and
they were very strange. They had like weird veins. Sorry.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, they had veins going through them. That's the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and they were layered like little hamburgers.
Yeah.
Crystal layer.
Yeah.
Bacon.
We've seen there's
tomato.
Volca sandwiches.
Yeah.
Yeah. Seafood sandwiches, really. Well, we've seen different types of coral and other fossils that are here in the limestone, and it looked like, at least on one of these boulders, that same coral had gotten trapped in you remember the
little tubers.
Yeah, the tubers that I'm not sure what they are, but we see them in the limestone all the time.
They had really well-defined little striations on them or whatever going up there.
Yeah.
It kind of looked like coral. It looked a lot like coral.
Right. So we saw one of those on top of them, and so like it kind of looked like these boulders were the results of pyroclastic flow. It wasn't actual lava; it was pyroclastic stuff that flowed out over to the inland sea that was supposedly here at the time. It was supposedly a shallow ocean covering most of this area.
We actually did find the historical marker too. We went.
Oh yeah.
We left that place with the boulders, and we went back to where we saw the sign that said historical marker. Sure enough, I find it, and it's a farm. It's like, this farm has been owned by the same family for a long time. End of historical marker.
Leave now.
So we're like, well, let's drive to that farm because it's towards the volcano.
It's really old, and they've been here a long time, and there's a volcano right here.
So surely they know.
Yeah.
And we went up to a gate that was like, stop, turn around, go away.
That's right.
So we finally decided to go to McKinney Falls State Park. And first thing we did inside the gate, we asked the guy that we were buying the ticket from. We were buying the tickets from the guy, and we're like, so, you know anything about the extinct volcano right over the hill over there? He's like, no, actually I don't. I'm new here. Damn.
Like, are you new to Austin?
But he told us just like the guy whose door I knocked on his house. He's like, yeah, I just moved here.
Yeah, I just moved here. Everybody just moved here, apparently.
So we go.
I don't know anything about volcano. I just got here.
So we go into the I don't know what it is.
The main
entrance building.
Yeah, where they've got where you can go in there and get
information
overnight tickets and stuff. Yeah.
And a drink for $5. Anyway,
yeah.
I asked the guy behind the desk, so what's the deal with the volcano? And he's like, yeah, well, it is extinct.
He starts giving him all these weird statistics, and then eventually he's like, so what you can do is just check Wikipedia, which is what I just did. And I was like, okay. Snark from the park.
That's all we know. It's on Wikipedia. It's like, okay.
We were walking out, and Kyle's like, Wikipedia's not a real source.
So we explored McKinney Falls, just the general area where everybody there was in swimming trunks,
oh my God,
carrying freaking beach balls and towels and wearing their shades, and
yeah, they had
me and Russ
lawn
are
chairs and their coolers full of beer and their kids and everything, and we're like dirty geologists. Sweaty.
Yeah, pants,
boots,
shirts, hats.
Obviously, no intention of swimming anywhere ever.
And we went hiking around on this place, and we did end up finding some cool stuff. A rock wall that the park apparently was just like, this rock wall's in the way.
Yeah.
So they just plowed a road through it, put a freaking cul-de-sac through it.
Yeah.
They had a little path along a massive boulder, this huge rock outcrop that stuck out above the river, and the rock wall continues along this thing all the way to the edge of a 30-foot cliff.
Yeah.
And they were like, push these stupid rock wall out of the way for our pedestrian footpath. And they just knocked it down and pushed it out of the way.
So when we're talking about a rock wall, we're talking about like a dry laid construction with rough stones. So the stones weren't finished or worked at all, and yet somebody stacked them up without using mortar, and to where they fit really well with each other. Now obviously it's not a tight fit like it would be if the stones had been worked, but they just took stones that are just like shaped however they were shaped, and then managed to like freaking Tetris them into this wall.
Right.
Okay. Yes, Tetris is a verb.
they Tetris them into a wall.
So anywhere where the park had not knocked it over or kicked it down or whatever to sweep it out of the way for the stupid swimmers. Like when we got into there was a couple of sections, maybe 200 or 300 feet, where it was in the deep woods. Not deep, but it was in the woods where there was nothing else around, and it was like 4 feet tall, sticking above the
beautiful
surface.
flat sides,
trees, and there's huge trees growing on either side of it, all around it. Like obviously, they weren't there when it was built, because the wall is like the growth of the tree is causing it to lean out, or bulge out, but it still hasn't fallen over in some sections. In some cases, it was leaning way over from this tree, and it was curved and stuff, but it was still holding together. It's just like, man, who built this?
Yeah, and it was running the long portion of it that we were at that went to the river was running basically due east and west. So I was like, hey,
do this yet.
We don't know. We don't know who built it. They don't know who built it. Of course, everybody's going to say, oh, the settlers or the farmers or whatever built this wall.
Right. The common explanation is like, well, it's either they were moving the rocks out of their fields that they were,
Which this wall was built along a massive rock outcropping.
Right.
So what
it's on top of a gigantic.
It was not for farming,
right?
Because you can't farm on top of a limestone boulder.
Right. I've never seen anybody on plow limestone. And it went all the way to the edge of it.
Right.
And stopped. And so, and it's like, the other thing they'll say is like, oh, they use them for fences.
But that doesn't work.
That doesn't work either because they're short.
Because obviously there is an old but newer fence that had been put in beside the wall because the wall doesn't work as a fence.
Right. They put barbed wire on this newer fence because barbed wire does work as a fence for cattle.
Right.
Whereas rock walls generally don't.
Unless, they can, but...
They can if they're tall, if they're really, really tall.
Yeah.
Like that one out on the property too. But anyway, so we find this first one, we're like, okay. And I marked it on the map to see. We knew we were eventually going to get across the river, and we were going to check over on the other side. If it continued on the other side, because the river was like, I can't describe it, but you can look at the pictures. There's like this long tongue of limestone that. To me, it looked like a mud flow, like that it all happened at once, because there was very little. You couldn't see any layering. So when you normally look at limestone, if there's a break, like if it's a canyon or canyon wall or whatever, you look on the side and you can see layers, defined layers. And that layer, that stratigraphy, shows you that each layer was usually laid down during one seasonal, during 1 year or whatever, or during larger cycles. But if you can't see any layering, that means the whole thing was put down.
And it kind of looked like, jumbled, garbled stuff.
That's right. And if you looked at the pattern of the right, kind of sloped down in one direction, like it really looked like a mud flow that had poured out and then stopped and then hardened there into limestone. But this river cut through it, like directly through the middle of it.
Right.
And so it cut this huge canyon. And as we kept walking, we found out like what was special about this park. And they're talking about the waterfalls, but really it's not. It's the cataracts that the water had cut into the limestone. So it's almost impossible to describe the geology that happened here. But like we've discussed the water tornadoes that appear in huge floods that start to eat potholes into the rock. There was tons of that
all over the place.
There was a bottleneck where the river took a 180-degree turn.
Hail!
And it just it bottlenecked within, because it was already trapped in this canyon that it had cut into this limestone, and it had to go around this curve or whatever, and it just it is an alien-looking landscape. There's huge, massive holes drilled through the limestone in all these different directions, and it leaves like a Swiss cheese sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's so many of them.
And the ones that were dry, that are not down in the water, which you can see the water was clear enough to where when you're looking down in, you can see these huge
Dark
circle
holes.
rings and whatever dark holes. But there were some on the sides that didn't have water in them. One had a big tree growing out of it, and it was at least 6 or 7 feet deep.
Yeah.
And it was full of rubble in the bottom. So, we don't know how deep it could be if it was excavated. Who knows?
Right. And a lot of them had like elongated forms, which was interesting because that implies that whatever the whirlpool was kind of doing this like back and forth oscillating motion over that area. So we kind of drilled this long lozenge shape. Or like
freaking commas.
I like the idea you had that like that when the water was coming, it would kind of tilt over and sort of drill it sideways. I was like, man, that's a cool.
Well, you know when you're sitting in the bathtub and it's draining out.
Yeah, and it's like.
No, seriously, we actually drained this pond for work, and there's a big pipe down in the bottom, and we took the valve, we opened the valve on the other end, and it starts draining everything, and yet the river flow is pushing the top of the water.
Yeah.
And the middle of the river is flowing faster than at the edges. But down in the bottom somewhere is this hole that the water's getting sucked down into, so this whirlpool forms. But as the whirlpool reaches up to the surface of the water, that surface is being moved. So the top of the whirlpool is like way over here near the bank, and we're looking at it, and you can see this long tunnel that just goes sideways and curves down.
It's a silvery tunnel under the water, like a long bubble.
It goes down a little bit at first, but then it just turns sideways and moves way over there, and then goes down, and you can see kind of where the hole was. So that's kind of what I was thinking.
Right. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. As soon as you said it, I was like, oh yeah, I can see how that could happen. Like it gets pushed over this way, and then it's starting to cut into it sideways.
It's freaking badass. Yeah. So Russell put pictures up there for y'all to look at.
Yeah.
The other cool thing is we went off the beaten path there, trying to get away from all the, the waterfalls people, and
they're not sheep; they're like seals or something.
We're not talking too much shit about these people because they were all having a good time.
Yeah,
we were having a good time. It was just a totally different good time.
It was just weird to stand there and I'm looking at all this stuff and I'm like, there's a gigantic cataclysm that happened here, and you guys are like, yay, waterfalls!
Yeah. Anyway, so we go off the beaten path and we find this other small ravine off to the side of this big area we're talking about. And we walk down it, and sure enough, we see something that looks a lot like the big boulders on the side of this volcano that's maybe a mile away or whatever. And it's underneath this massive, solid chunk of limestone that's really where
it's like characteristic of the whole park.
Right.
It's this limestone and stuff.
So we're like, is this a pyroclastic flow under here? And we took some pictures of it. It had these really strange honeycomb-like crystalline patterns in it, and very, very. It did not look like limestone or sedimentary rock at all.
Right. Oh, however, it was like definitively layered.
Right.
But it was not sedimentary rock, and it was like full of crystals and other.
And the crystal structure, or they were almost like lattices that would go up through different layers.
Right.
And crisscross around it. It was very strange.
Like, think of looking at looking at a piece of cardboard after you cut it. Like looking at the side, you see this sort of this like supporting lattice work inside there. It was like that. You're looking at a layer of rock, and there's this weird.
Yeah. So we got some pictures of that, and then our buddies that we had invited to go with us, who decided to be lazy and wiki rabbit hole at home instead of going to look for volcanoes, actually found a really good diagram of the volcano. Yeah.
Can't go to the volcano, but here's a diagram of the volcano.
That's right. So he linked it to me, and sure enough, we see the pyroclastic flow on the side of this diagram shows it going all the way under the ground, and then resurfacing somewhere in the bed of Onion Creek, which is the creek bed we were in when we found that.
Right. The Onion Creek had dug its way back down to this layer.
Next time, shall we keep?
Yeah. So it was really fascinating.
Then we found Williams Creek.
Yeah.
In the back. We went back there to kind of look at the homestead area and maybe look around for some arrowheads and stuff. And
sign for Indian mounds is really because it's where a fork in the river is, and that's
right. There's a fork or whatever, so we're like, that's a usually good place. And we knew there was a homestead back there, and we also knew that like homesteads are usually built on homesteads, and so a lot of times we found them. So we went back to look at that and read some bullshit propaganda about slaves, and then like seriously. And then we found Williams Creek back there, which when we first found it was like we were on top of we were looking down at it from maybe 50 feet, 30 to 50 feet. And I was like, I really hope this isn't an overhang we're standing on.
Because it was all dirt.
Yeah. We worked our way, we walked down the trail farther, and like we got down there without having to rappel down this cliff. But then when we got back to where we were looking up at the cliff, it was totally an overhang.
Yeah, we're standing by these trees thinking we're safe here, but
Yeah, no, the trees were over nothing. I got some pictures of that too.
and then we found some really awesome fossils down in that. There was a big layer about 6 feet high in the cliff wall. It became clay all the way down to the riverbed. This gray, solid clay.
So coming up from the river, it was like this weird gray clay, and then from that all the way up to the top of the cliff was like obviously river or flood droppings.
Right,
Rounded
river rocks,
and
rounded rocks, yeah.
Dirt. But below that, there's this weird clay stuff. It was, I don't know.
Yeah, and there were these huge toenail-looking, like, they were clamshells, but they have like the spiral at the very end of them.
Yeah.
And we'll put some pictures of these on there. They're really cool. I can't remember what they're called, of course.
Right.
But I find one that's about the size of my hand. I'm like, oh my god! Oh! And then like a little while later, we find a way bigger one, and I'm like, throw that one down. Yes!
And then I'm like, wow, look at this one. Holy
fuck! They were everywhere.
Yeah, they were.
And then Russ is like, are they coming out of this clay? And I'm like, no, of course they're not. They're not coming out of the clay. And then the next thing I know, I see one sticking out of the clay, like 2 feet down from the top of the clay. I'm like, holy shit, they are coming out of the clay. Dug one out of there, and
yeah, and then we started to see them all in the clay everywhere.
and a bunch of other stuff that these imprints, Russ was calling them shadows of.
Because I like to be creepy like that.
Yeah, he's like, they're just shadows of the life forms that lived here before. Because it was literally this impression, you could see the entire face of a shell. No color, no material, it was all clay, but you could see the whole imprint of it. And yet, the clay, you could see like a portion of it, and there's like clay on top of the other portion, and you could peel that clay off of the top of that imprint and see show the rest of it. The clay that you picked up had no shell material in it.
It was very strange. It's like you would think that you would see there was some remnants of the creature in there if you knew it was sandwiched between the two layers. But you peel it up and there would be nothing, but there was still the end.
On both sides, but no material. And Russ was just says shadows.
Yeah.
It was the shadow.
Well, because sometimes that stuff really bothers me.
Show shadows of the world that has passed. And I'm just like, shut up, dude. They're everywhere.
There shall be shadows. Not much shadows in the clay!
Billions of creatures, just shadows now in this clay. We were afraid we got chiggers all over us, so we sat in the river and let the minnows eat them off us. And then we went home, and it was a great day.
That last part is true. All you script guards out there, we were like, let's just sit down in this pool for a little bit, cool off. And after we were in there for like 5 minutes, all these minnows showed up, and they were like, what's up, guys? And then they started to like just nibble. And it didn't hurt, but it was like, the first one was like, oh.
The first one like bit my leg. I was like, ah! And then it came back, and I was like, it's not gonna hurt me, all right. Yeah. And then, bam! We're just surrounded by hundreds of them. They're all
976. And then I was like, maybe they're eating chickens off this. I was like, oh my god, please let that be happening.
So we sat there for like another 20 minutes just letting them do it. Please get them all.
Yeah, so it was a good day trip. And I think we've got another one planned. We're going to go to
Rock Springs.
Yeah, we're going to check out Devil Sinkhole and probably never come back. Because, you need to come back and stuff with Devil in the name. 2411.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to check that out. And we'll tell you guys about that next week. So stay tuned.
Yeah, if we actually get to do it next week.
If we actually come back.
If we come back.
What do we got here? We got 6 minutes.
Yeah, so now nobody can talk a bunch of shit about how we just sit around here and look at pictures on the internet and don't ever do anything and think we know everything, because we know that we don't know shit. And we do stuff.
Well, they can still do that, because we do still do that.
Yeah, wait, what?
Right? Like, they can say, like, those guys just fucking sit around and look at pictures on the internet and they don't know anything. And we're like, that's right. But we went to this place the other day and we still don't know anything. But we did go to that place.
Yeah, so we are actually...
did not get chiggers, so I know that.
Yeah. Minnows love chiggers.
Should have had chiggers. Minnows are fat. Instead, it was great.
And they're starting a cargo call now about the two giants that once came to their river.
Yeah, we made up a whole story. An entire story, like this massive anthropological story of these minnows. Because
we were tired as fuck on the way home too, so we were just like, we weren't talking about anything at first, and I was like, man, we have 2 hours to drive after all that. So when that conversation started, it was great, and I was not going to let it go.
Yeah, it was hilarious.
There's two giant buttholes in that river that they're going to be like
revering for the next 10,000 years. To them, whatever, like 4 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
But they're also trapped in their little segments because the river was really low, so there's like a pool. And the water flows or whatever, but then it either disappears beneath gravel for a while, or it gets too shallow for anything to swim in. So these fish are like, their whole world is like 50 feet of riverbed, and obviously, just based on what we know from humans, there's nothing else outside of that. I mean, that's
right.
the world.
Yeah,
that's
it.
The fucking world. Don't tell me about weird aliens coming from space that doesn't exist.
Right.
Stuff above the mirror thing.
Freaking flat river fish.
Fear doesn't fall from heaven. There are no such thing as giants. Until there are.
But these two giants showed up and they provided all these chiggers for food, and it was the golden age, and they were the first minnows. In the time of the first minnows.
And what were the fish that were just watching?
They were like little perch.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were
weird. Like all these minnows are all over, like just like munching out or whatever, and there's the perch like just chilling.
The perch just like shows up and sits like right in the middle and just watches.
It does not. It's just like very still and just watches. And I was like, they're the lifeguards.
Yeah.
No splashing, no diving. Anyway, the story is dumb, but it was hilarious.
Yeah.
So,
dumb stories are hilarious.
dumb stories are hilarious, but usually you had to be there. So we probably should spare them that because they weren't.
So yes, on the topic of volcanoes though, I did read that there have been like 462, possibly more by this point, earthquakes in Yellowstone under the supervolcano, around the supervolcano for the last week.
I don't know. That's a lot. Earthquake swarms.
Yeah, so they said that one of the stories I read said that, they're like, there's been over 400 earthquakes in Yellowstone and under this supervolcano, and we don't know what's going on. But this is a very normal occurrence. It happens all the time. It happened last year.
It
wasn't that many though. There was a whole lot, but this is pretty normal.
Every Yellowstone earthquake swarm story is schizophrenic or has multiple personalities. Like every one of them, they're like, "Oh my God, there's so many earthquakes," but it's totally normal. This happens all the time. But man, there's never been this many. But it's okay. We see a lot sometimes.
And there was like 4.5 magnitude once. Well, last time there was maybe 4.4 magnitude, so it's really not that big of a deal. But still,
this time I got like 10.
So yeah, of course the scientists are like, this thing could blow any moment and kill us all, but it's not going to.
Right. Yep.
Most likely, it's not going to. So everyone stay where you are.
We're giving all these warning signs that it's about to explode and kill everybody, but it won't.
Yeah. So don't panic and don't leave your home. Stay here.
Don't leave your home. Camping in Yellowstone, stay here. If it explodes, you'll die first and won't even know. If you leave, you might have to run through the lava.
Yeah, so we did some research, a little bit of research on volcanoes when we were on our way up there, and it turns out that the explosive type has to do with the amount of.
Yeah, there's multiple reasons that make it explode, but the big one is the gas, right?
Yes.
And then
So they talk about viscosity, which is the resistance to flow. And so the higher viscosity the lava is, the less it wants to flow. So the more
sticky it is.
The more sticky it is, and it sticks to itself and it sticks to everything else. And
you're just like,
so a highly viscous lava flow, lava will typically outgas. Like as it approaches the surface,
the gas is swelling.
Right. There's less pressure. So gas that's dissolved basically into the lava will nucleate and form gas bubbles that will then come out. If it is a low viscosity, then it's easy for the gas bubbles to escape.
Right. So think of like a soda. When you open the soda, that that lets a bunch of pressure out, so all the bubbles in the soda start to expand, and they join each other and make real bubbles, and then it starts to outgas, right? If you imagine that soda was like cold maple syrup, and you crack that thing open, it would be a very different reaction, and it eventually would just blow up in your face, because instead of kind of like being able to go and let the gas out, slowly, because the liquid is very viscous. It would kind of tend to gather, and it would reach a sort of catastrophic point where it would all come out all at once and blow up in your face.
Right, and that's basically it has to do something with I can't remember what the material is. Silica dissolved into that's part of the lava. Okay, so in Yellowstone, it is incredibly high silica type. It's an explosive type.
Okay,
so it's like it can build up. When the lava is approaching the surface, the gas can't escape, and it can't escape, and it can't escape.
So it's very viscous, is what you're saying.
Yes, and eventually, blammo, it explodes.
Yeah, and Yellowstone is weird too, because when I looked at it, I was like, what are they saying? This is super volcano. There's fucking mountains in Yellowstone. I'm thinking of Yellowstone, and it's like, there's all these volcanic features, but they're not, they're not.
Because the last time it went off, it blew that mountain away.
The mountain was like, So Yellowstone is kind of like a big basin. It's a depression. Okay, and every volcano has an injection chamber. So none of them are exploding directly from the mantle. Right? The lava, the mantle material, which is the lava, is injected into the crust through some fault or crack or whatever, and it will exploit that and widen it. Okay, and then it will either find or it will inflate a chamber somewhere in there, and that's where it will sit and get trapped there.
And that's typically where it picks up the silica, right? In the crust, it starts to melt the walls and stuff of the crust and picks up silica there.
Right. So every volcano has a chamber like that. Most of them are the magma chambers can be miles and miles and miles underground. In a shield volcano, like this is the Big Island of Hawaii, that's called a shield volcano. They're humongous because the magma chamber is actually inside the mountain. Okay, so that's why they're so huge. Like the mountain is actually, it's the magma chamber coming up out of the ground with the mountain on top of it. Yeah, that's why they're just ridiculously immense. But Yellowstone isn't any of that. Yellowstone is actually a completely different kind of supervolcano, and they may not ever build mountains because the injection chambers on supervolcanoes are just, they're huge. And there's probably multiple levels of them.
I know they did recently find a second level.
Yeah.
That they did not know existed before.
Right, and so that means the magma injects into one level, and then eventually, the pressure gets high enough, and then it injects into the next one, and it's getting closer and closer to the surface. But there's this sort of, the pressure thing is more complex.
And I would imagine that the level on the top has the most silica in it.
Right.
Which is the highest viscosity. The stuff in the bottom is pushing up and
right. So it's easier for it because it's got lower viscosity down low and it's hotter. It's easier for it to make its way to the next chamber. By the time it gets to the top, it's real thick. It's cooler.
Right.
Right. And it's got a lot more silica in it,
and also gases are wanting to nucleate and expand and
right.
Can't.
And it hasn't yet actually reached any kind of point where most of the pressure has dropped. It's still under a great deal of pressure.
Right.
Until it finds a way out of that last chamber and gets out into the open air where the pressure is almost gone.
Right, so it's kind of like you were saying, if you shake up that bottle of soda, as long as you got the cap on, you don't really see a whole lot of air bubbles forming. But if it blows one cap, you puncture a hole in that soda can,
right,
all those bubbles are coming out because
it's explosive.
It's relieving the pressure, and it can be explosive. Yeah.
Right, so the Yellowstone one...
You can test this at home by shaking up a spray paint can and shooting it with a rifle.
Do not try that at home, please.
We have to take a snake break.
Did you just say to shake up a spray paint can and shoot it with a rifle?
Yeah. We have this, Russ made this logo called I Tried It at Home. And it's got the little stickman figure, it's one of those like warning signs, OSHA safety things. The guy's on fire and he's got glasses.
Right, broken leg, on fire. I tried it at home.
Yeah, well, we do. So we're taking a snake break.
And we will come back with more volcanoes and monsters.
Science. Snake science. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Limitless conversation between two limited individuals. Snake Bros podcast. Snakes! About anything and everything, but particularly those great mysteries that reach to us from the greatest antiquity. And those mysteries that we reach for with our greatest technology.
Sometimes they're both the same thing.
That is true. That is true. So, you have anything left you want to say about massive explosions of magma?
Well, I have a pet theory about Yellowstone, and I've actually posted it on some geology. I don't think it was a forum. I don't remember how I got there, but it was actual geologists and other people, other competent, qualified, accredited people talking about Yellowstone and its possibility of being a supervolcano, and they were throwing, science back and forth at each other. And I came in and I was like, so hey guys, I have this idea. And I was basically saying, so because the structure of Yellowstone, at least from the surface, the area nearest the surface, it doesn't look like a standard magma chamber, which is usually vertical in the structure. But, some of them can be massive in width as well, but a lot of times they have a vertical structure, right? The magma is exploiting cracks in the rock or whatever, some kind of fault. But Yellowstone is like a lake of magma. It's this massive, wide, I can't remember the dimensions, but it's really huge. It's miles and miles and miles in width across from one end to the other. So it's underneath most of the park. It's a huge, and
Cough button.
right. It's so periodic. If you look at the timeline that they give of the previous Yellowstone supervolcano explosions, it's like a clock. 400,000 years, bam. 400,000 years, bam. 450,000 years, bam. I'm like, okay, there's a cycle here.
Yeah.
And most of the time, stuff this catastrophic is usually it's cosmogenic. The cycle is outside the Earth. Because there's nothing on this Earth that results in energy outputs that explosive, or as far as I know, the cycle's here.
But there could be a body in space.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
That its cycle coming near us or whatever
Right.
we run into happens every 400 roughly thousand.
Exactly. So I was basically proposing
cool.
to these guys. I was like, look. So I think because also the Yellowstone supervolcano structure, the whole thing just appears out of nowhere suddenly. At some point, millions of years in the past, just bam, it's suddenly there, and then every 400,000 years after that, it explodes or whatever. I'm like, okay, so my idea is some large Oort cloud body got dragged into the inner solar system in those millions of years past, and then it's being handed around by the outer planets or whatever. The same deal where it turns it into a comet stream. So you get these big streams of material, and then Earth runs into the stream and gets smacked by a huge piece at Yellowstone. It generates the
initial.
Right. It makes it goes in and and I was suggesting that it was like the only thing difficult about this theory is that it has to be a relatively small but extremely dense projectile, like whatever the impactor is. Like in other words,
Armor piercing.
Yes, because I was telling these guys the reason there's not a standard impact crater is because it didn't impact like a normal thing it'll bury itself into the crust. At some point, all of its velocity is turned into heat, so it stops moving forward in the crust and then it just explodes. Mm-hmm. But if you have some incredibly dense, core material. Let's say there's core material of another planet out there in those. Yeah. Right. So this is now a metallic solid. It is like an armor-piercing bullet. It could penetrate all the way to the magma. So there would be no typical crater structure of the explosion, like the big bowl with the uplifted layers at the edges, which is a typical crater structure. Instead, you would have this series of holes, or a series of open chambers. Because as the thing penetrates the crust, it is going to bits of it are going to ablate off, and then explode and create these open holes. But basically, it creates a channel all the way down to the magma. The magma responds by backfilling, fills up all these chambers, and then we have the first Yellowstone supervolcano explosion. Okay. And then every 400,000 years or so, when we come back into the gravitic, like I don't know. I was thinking it was gravity because I'm not. I can't suggest that like something hits that same spot every 400,000 years, but I can say that there's some large body out there, and especially if it's core material, like heavy, incredibly dense metallic, whatever, that it comes really close to us. And like, remember that the magma chamber of Yellowstone is a lake. It would be affected by tides. So if this very like dense thing comes nearby us, it would pull all the lava in the chamber over to one side as it went past, and then it would come back, and that would be enough to crack the structure, and it would explode again. So I said that in this. I was like, I know this is completely out there, and like, but check this out.
Hardcore material.
Yeah, extremely hardcore material, not safe for work. And actually, what was cool is like most of them were like, no, but there were two of them that told me that it was. They were like, well, I'll give you points for originality. I've never thought of a tidally activated volcano, you know. But then the other guy was like, well, magma it has to be affected by tides. And then they started talking about that because the Earth is pulled around, you know, the shape of the Earth is pulled around by the moon into this, and that's the magma.
Right.
And you know, and they're like, yeah, so it is affected by tides. And then so they started asking each other, well, what does the moon tides do to this lake? And they went off in a bunch of math, and I was like, okay, I'll see you guys later. Because they were actually looking at it. They're like, they started to say that because they're like all the stuff that you see on the calculations of this lake exploding. They're saying that the slightest disturbance in this massive amount of because it's a huge, heavy amount of rock in this chamber. They're like, the slightest disturbance in it will cause it to explode. And all of a sudden, these guys are like, wait, tides, fuck, right? So now they're like doing all these calculations. So I left them at it, but it was pretty cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, they thought my theory was crap, but somehow I got them to see that like tides will affect that freaking lake.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never thought of that.
So anyway,
Lava tides.
I bet my theory's true. Well, you guys think you got started? Get out of here, kid.
Oh yeah, there's one thing I want to mention, totally off this topic, but last segment I tried a different microphone for Russ, and
It's always on me. Here, Russ.
yeah. Well, it's the same type of microphone that I'm using, and it turned out to not sound very good. I listened back, and so if you're wondering why the first segment Russ sounded like he was in a tin can,
It's because I was in a tin can.
yeah. And I didn't mic it well.
Yeah.
I didn't like the way this mic picked it up.
Mike was dumb, but it didn't work very well. But that tin can was a really bad idea.
But I still would like to thank Smith Sonic Studios for once again providing us with another mic that we can't use.
Yeah.
Plus more.
I love that logo. Smith Sonic Studios, where musicians go to kick ass. Plus more.
Yes. So, anything else on that?
No, yeah, I think I'm done with the volcanoes and stuff. It was a great day trip. We're gonna do some more.
Yeah. Cool. I would really like to get into this other thing that I've been thinking about the past couple of days.
Go for it.
So I was driving to work the other morning, and
Not this story again.
the same story. And I was just looking at all the green, you know, all the green and the plants, and everything out in the hills and the trees and the grass and all this stuff. I started thinking about what is it about all of these plants that, you know, it's like this green color is like the sign or symbol sort of to us of life, plant life. And I'm sure a bunch of you right now are like, chlorophyll! Or go! Green means go! But really that, you know, I was just thinking about it in terms of why does this stuff reflect green? Okay. And I just wanted to look into it some more, so I started looking into it, and this led me down a rabbit hole, and I'm going to take you with me.
Yeah, now I would say like the whole people saying chlorophyll is correct, but that's not what you're talking about. You're not saying like, you're not asking why. How should I put this? There's something of agency in this, right? There's some idea of like there's a reason that it's green, and it's not just because the molecules are like this, and so it just so happens it's green. Is that what you're saying? That there's a reason more than just like, you know, because chlorophyll reflects green.
I guess what I was trying to look into was what's the significance of the fact that it is green.
Okay.
Or maybe, and okay, because I'm into resonance, right? I like to look at things in terms of resonance, in terms of vibration. So I can't say that I was thinking specifically that, no. But I was just wanting to look into it, like, I wonder what, what is it? And it doesn't matter what the it could have been some other molecule, or whatever it was. It just was like, what is it about that makes it green? That, so I started looking into it, and I looked into the visible spectrum, the human visible spectrum. And it turns out that there are basically 7 primary colors that we see. And we start out on the low end is red, through orange, yellow, green, cyan. Is that how you said that?
Yeah.
Blue and violet.
Cyan.
Okay. Yeah. So immediately there, the 7 colors made me think of the 7 notes in the musical scale, right? So these 7 notes in the musical scale correlate to each other in terms of their waves, the frequency and the wavelength of the frequencies of these notes. And once you get to the 8th note, like if you start out at 1 and you move up the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, the 8th note is again do. It's the same as the first, but it's an octave higher. So in terms of frequency and wavelength, it is either twice the frequency, and half the wavelength. So that if you have the first note, 1, and then you have the 8th note, they fit physically within each other. Like the 8th note has half the wavelength, so
Hello.
2 of those wavelengths will fit perfectly into 1 wavelength of the first note. So you get the octave. They sound the same, but one's higher than the other. And I don't know how a better way to describe that, but it's like the way I've always thought of it in music is that it's the same note, but it's called an octave, right? So you can have on a piano, if you think of a piano, you have the key of C
Journey well.
down there, and then the octave above that is another C. The octave above that is another C, and so on. Forget that one little messed up note there.
A little bit of dissonance in that.
Yeah, so it's like they're all the same note, but their wavelengths are each one is cut in half.
So if you hear them played together. Right.
No, it's playing them both. Yeah.
You can hear that's. I mean, you have to really listen to hear the,
As opposed to those two, which
Right.
are obviously
different.
they're
notes.
different. But again, this is a C and an E, right? So the E is a third up.
Yeah.
So its wavelength is a fraction,
Yeah.
right? And so it still fits into it, but there's, it fits into it in a different fraction. It's not two.
I'll have graphs and stuff where you can look in the show notes and see what we're talking about with the waves fitting in and stuff. It'll be clear.
Right. When you see it graphed out, it's a lot easier to understand. And working in a studio for years and years, I've learned to sort of understand waves through the visual representation on the computer. So forgive me if I'm not explaining this where you can understand it clearly just from hearing me talk. It's kind of hard.
Just remember that there will be pictures to that.
Yeah. So back to the colors in visible light spectrum. Once again, there's 7 colors. So I correlate that to the musical scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Okay, from red to violet. So then I looked at ultraviolet, right? And it turns out that basically this is true when you ultraviolet, in the ultraviolet range is the octave of red. And let me pull this up on my phone here.
Yeah. So you're saying that like once you get into the ultraviolet range, which is the light that is just above the human visual spectrum, you get another set of colors that correlate.
Right.
The ones we can see, it's just that they're an octave higher, so our eyes don't pick up.
Right, they're just outside of our perceptive range. So when you think of in terms of sound, what we hear in sound is from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. Okay, so we hear multiple octaves in there, and you could say that at 20 hertz, the octave above 20 hertz is 40 hertz. The octave above 40 hertz is 80 hertz. Right? And so on and so forth. So we see, or we hear many octaves. But in the light range, we only see within one. We can't actually see an entire octave.
Right, and a rainbow is the whole octave.
Right. Except that, well, we can't perceive the 8th note, which would actually be the octave of red.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That's my point, is that we only see the 7 steps. We can't see the 8th, which would be the repeating. The next red, exactly. So in the ultraviolet spectrum, I was thinking of it in terms of like, that's the next red. So I looked at this to show you here. Well, I'll tell you about it. The wavelength, we'll talk about it in terms of wavelength. That's how long the wave is, obviously. So in red, we're looking at roughly 700 nanometers. And at violet, it's 400, roughly. Okay. So in order to see the octave of red, we would need to be able to see 350 nanometers.
That's the smallest we can see it for.
Right. So we can't quite see a whole octave in color, and I just wonder how confusing that would be, you know? Like,
we could start to see if we could see many octaves.
If you could see many octaves of color, maybe it wouldn't be confusing. I don't know.
Because some animals do. I mean, cats see into the near infrared and the near ultraviolet.
Right.
Like, in other words, they don't see the whole octaves outside, but they see a couple of notes on it.
They see below. Okay.
Yeah.
So when people listen to octaves, I've found that they don't. It's hard for people to distinguish the difference. Like when you were playing the two.
Right.
Notes. That's two notes.
Very difficult for most people to figure those two out.
So anyway, back to this green thing. So it turns out chlorophyll, they say, has a green pigment. Okay? Well, really what's happening is that the vibration, I look at light in terms of vibration, the waves of light of the whole visible spectrum.
Nice pun there.
Are the waves of light in the whole visible spectrum coming down from the sun are hitting a leaf. And we see green because it's actually it's reflecting that frequency of light, and it's absorbing the others. So if you imagine that the molecule chlorophyll is absorbing these other frequencies, these other vibrations, that it's resonating at these notes. And what it says is that chlorophyll absorbs primarily blue, and then next red, and it doesn't absorb green, and it doesn't really absorb the colors that are close to green. Okay, so I wanted to give you an audio example of basically the resonant quality of chlorophyll using these. I wrote basically the red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and violet on the keyboard on starting at middle C. So basically, chlorophyll first absorbs blue and then red. So it's kind of that right there. And green is closer to blue. So if you than red is. So if you add orange to red, it's kind of like that. That's the. So I wonder if I recorded that and took that wave, you know, analyzed that complex wave of those three notes, and then compared it to an analyzation of the chlorophyll resonance, if it would be.
Yeah, if you mapped it shape or lengthwise to the nanometer sizes.
Yes, exactly.
Probably,
I bet you it would be
Yes.
freaking really close to the same thing.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was really cool, and also that basically throws the whole green energy thing in the trash, because the reason why that shit's green is because it's rejecting that. It's not turning green into fucking energy.
Right.
It's turning blue
All plants
and red.
reject green. That's what he's basically trying to say.
Yes, the energy that chlorophyll is getting to fucking for photosynthesis is coming from red and blue, not green.
Keep your life to your own.
This is a bunch of bullshit. I just thought that was really interesting, and that I wanted to give you that example of how I try to kind of look at things.
Well, I want to hear what it's rejecting. Can you play? Let's play what it's reflecting back at us. Yeah, see, no one wants that.
So that's yellow, green, and cyan.
Yeah. Yeah, no one wants that.
Yeah, it's like, get that out of here. But okay, so this is the other interesting thing. When you have notes that harmonize with each other, their energy is more sustainable. Okay, if you're a snowflake, you probably like that word.
Whoa.
Sorry. It's more sustainable because it's a stable
Let me just
system.
grab
So
the
when you
next
have these
few
two like dissonant
applications.
notes, wait, is that the right?
Yeah, that's right.
So there's like two notes right next to each other, and there's this third, what they call a third beat, because the wavelengths of the first note and the second note don't really ever line up perfectly.
So they actually, when you merge them together, they create an entirely different wave It's
called the third.
right, and it has to absorb the energy from both of those waves to create it, and it basically attenuates everything.
Right, it's oscillating back and forth. You go wow 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 wow. So
Welcome.
it's not as stable, or maybe if that's the wrong word. That's kind of the way I look at it. As a harmony.
That's correct.
Or like a fifth.
Right.
Right.
Those aren't
That
those
was a little less stable.
Those aren't the same wavelength. The wavelengths don't fit perfectly in, but they are.
They're ratios.
The way they fit is always the same. Right. In other words, there's a pattern there that
Right,
develops.
there's a pattern.
And so that pattern repeats, and that makes it stable. Yeah.
Right. So that got me looking into smell, and
What?
Yeah, sense of smell.
Yeah.
So we have hearing and sight, and I kind of have like a basic understanding of how we perceive these things in terms of waves.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking smell is a very similar thing. Like every molecule is resonating. They're all vibrating.
Yeah.
And so we breathe like certain molecules into our nose, and there's
Viola.
something about those vibrations is transferring information.
Right.
And we're sensing that.
raise your vibrations.
That's right. So it turns out that there are a couple of theories on that. One is basically vibration theory, and the other one is olfaction. It has to do with the geometry, right? So there's this idea that, and then there's one that sort of contains the two together, where there's these receptors in your nose that have a specific geometric shape. And so certain molecules can't even fit into them to get in there and resonate anything. So they won't be detected by that receptor. But you get another molecule that is the right shape, it can go in there. A bunch of different molecules can be the right shape, and they can fit into a receptor. And then there's the binding idea of like how long that molecule or how well it will bind. And when the molecule gets into this thing, it resonates, and there's a ratio to what the receptor is tuned to and what the molecule is vibrating at. And so there will be a certain how well it binds is kind of based on that, right? If they're very well tuned, it'll bind really well, and it'll be a powerful freaking smell. If it's not very well, it'll be
like
faint.
one of those farts that seem to follow you around.
Yeah, they're just binding in there, man.
They bind in there and they fucking stay.
They just stay in there. It's not really that the gas is still coming out.
Right. It's not really that the fart is still
It's
around.
just
You
stuck
just
in your
still
nose.
have it stuck in your nose.
So I didn't get real deep into that. I find all of this stuff very interesting, and I like to look at, or try to look at things in, I don't want to say that, it sounds cheesy, but in a different way, in a new way, but I typically use how I understand sound and music to sort of relate to various phenomena that I read about or observe in terms of light. And almost every time, these things correlate so well together. And I just thought that was a really interesting one.
The first question he asked me about on this subject was years ago at this point. He said, where does sound become light? It was something along those lines.
Yeah.
Where basically he was saying, like, at what frequency is sound now correlating with the electromagnetic one? You know, maybe not sound becoming light, but is there a note?
Yeah. What note is it? What frequency is it?
What note is it where sound is like the same frequency as some color of light, you know? And I was like, there's no such thing, you know? I'm like, because I'm thinking of mediums, you know, and I'm like, well, sound is moving through air, but of course it doesn't. Sound can move through any medium, just like, you know, so that was dumb. But most sound we associate with is moving through our atmosphere, which is a very particular medium.
Right.
And it will not accept certain wavelengths, like ones that are very tiny, that are smaller than the molecules of the air that it generally contains, right? So, and most light is in that. The wavelengths are tiny, tiny because also you have to realize that light is moving incredibly fast. So, all of these, like, you have to hold multiple properties in your head at once if you're trying to understand what's happening when waves are moving past you, because as the observer or observing the waves, what really counts for you is the beat. How many, like tick, 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 how many times the wave are moving past. But that matters on how fast the wave system itself is moving.
Right.
Right. And then how long the wavelengths are. So in light, you can have incredibly long wavelengths, just in terms of how long they are, one wave after another. But the beat will be incredibly fast because light's going 186,000 miles per second or whatever.
Right.
Right. Whereas sound moving through our atmosphere is going 600 something miles an hour, right? Which is it's not even moving compared to light. So sound can have it'll have a 3-foot long wave, but when it hits you, it's like this incredibly low tone. Whereas like light can have wavelengths hundreds of miles long, and you would never hear them because they.
Yeah. So another interesting thing on that point, as the observer. Your motion within the medium affects what you perceive. So if at a distance there's a note being projected over this wave, like this is a C. Sorry about that. This keyboard is sort of behind me. Right? And that's being projected, and the sound is traveling at you. Let's say you're at sea level. Right? The sound is traveling at you at 1,125 feet per second. And you're standing still, and the thing producing the sound is standing still. Now, if you traveled towards the thing producing the sound at 1,125 feet per second, then you would be hitting those waves twice as fast, and it would sound like this. But that's not actually the
observer, yeah.
That's because of the observer. So it's like relative. It's like relativity.
Right. Because the thing receiving the sound is also an object that's moving around in space. The sound will change based on what that object's relative motion is compared to the thing making the sound. And it's so like, this is the Doppler effect that most people have heard of. You're standing on the side of the road. An
ambulance is coming.
Yeah, or even just cars going by, they go shh when they're tired, the sound the tires make, and that's Doppler. Like as it's coming towards you. Yeah. Or if it's the guy shouting.
Yeah, so if you're in the middle of the Empire State Building on the middle floor and somebody jumps off the top, they go, but they were actually screaming the same note.
Right, they weren't changing their note. They were the same terrified level the whole time. So what happens is as they're approaching you, they're producing sound, but because they also have a velocity, and their direction of travel is the same direction that the sound is having to go to get to you, the sound waves will stack up. In other words, the frequency will be higher. Then when they pass you, right, they're still screaming the same note, but like as they're now the sound waves are having to come out and go towards you when their velocity is away from you, so the sound waves are farther apart, so it gets lower.
Right.
So yeah, that's the Doppler effect, and this happens to light too.
Yes.
Light Dopplers.
So when there's like a star out there that is, say, in a galaxy, and it's on one side of the galaxy.
Far away. It's a long time ago.
It's like spinning towards us, and that star is actually hauling ass towards us. It will be blue shifted. Blue shifted is what they call it, because the frequency of light is moving higher in this spectrum, like to us.
Yeah.
Perceiving it, right? If you're moving with the star, it will not be blue shifted.
Right.
But then the stars that are moving away from us, or that we're moving away from, are said to be red shifted.
Right.
Because that's a lower frequency, so the light waves are spread further apart.
Right. So if you were, let's say that somehow our solar system, like with the sun and all the planets and everything, including Earth, somehow begins to accelerate at a massive rate away from, just accelerates in some direction out into the universe, and the acceleration continues, then everything in front of us, like everything in front of the direction of our travel, will begin to blue shift. Right. So the whole, like all the stars and everything in that direction of the sky that we're looking at would begin to get brighter and bluer and weird, and they would sort of start to clump together too. Whereas on the other side of the sky, people in Australia will have to look at the redshift sky. It's like a dim, boring, gets darker and darker, but everything still clumps together. And if eventually the solar system with the sun and everything it approaches the actual speed of light, we're getting really close to traveling the speed of light, then in the blue shift direction, there would be a single, like, incredibly radioactive glowing dot that is the entire universe in that direction.
That we'd be approaching.
Yeah, and it's all blue shifted to a point where we wouldn't be able to go outside. It would kill you because the radiation would be so high, right? Because we're hitting all these radioactive...
hitting it all ridiculously fast.
Whereas the universe that we're traveling away from, we wouldn't be able to see at all.
So wait a
It would just
minute.
be a black sky.
Would that actually make the light... So normal light frequencies, if you move towards them fast enough, they become radiation.
Well, they become damaging frequent, like gamma on the light scale all the way up at the top is deadly no matter what.
Right, but I'm saying because it's a high frequency, right?
Yeah.
So if you're moving towards a low frequency light to the point that it's such a high frequency that it's in the gamma.
Yeah, it kills you. Yeah.
Okay, so it becomes essentially
Yes.
the perceiver.
Yeah.
It's gamma.
But it's
That's crazy.
But it's not.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, but it's not. It's
So if you run at someone fast enough, you can see through their body.
That's right. And kill them. Yeah. Just the light of you approaching will kill them. but gamma radiation is not the kind of radiation that people think of when they think of radiation, which comes from like a nuclear reactor or whatever. That's different stuff. Gamma radiation is actually more like a laser. Okay, it's actual light that has been made into such a powerful thing that when you're hitting it, it's tearing you apart, right? So it's really high energy. Whereas like radiation that people think of like, like, oh my god, Fukushima radiation, that's something else. That's something that's completely different. That's heavy particles that are not traveling in waves. They're just...
Right, but they also are radioactive and they're emanating.
The radioactivity is them emanating.
Right, they're emanating
Right.
waves of extremely high frequency.
Maybe that's what's happened. I always look at it because they're neutrons. And neutrons are like big massy particles with no electrical charge. Unlike the proton, which is positive, and then electron, which is negative. So if a big protons are big too, but if a proton was flying at you, it would start to dodge stuff because it's got electrical charge, right? It would move around all your nuclei because those are filled with protons also, so the proton would go around that. Whereas a neutron doesn't give a fuck. It just runs into everything, which is why it's damaging. So that's called alpha radiation. Neutrons are flying out of these of the radioactive atoms, and because they're neutrons, they have a lot of mass. They're moving it near the speed of light, and they don't dodge anything because they don't have an electrical charge. So they just start running into your DNA and breaking it apart, and then making you have cancer and stuff. So, or tearing apart concrete or whatever material they're running into. Whereas gamma radiation is more like I said, like a laser. It's made of photons. It's, photons have no mass.
Yeah.
So, wow, how do we get there? Anyway,
I don't know, but I'm always like when you talk about stuff like that, like I'm always trying to plug it into like my understanding of waves in the way that I understand sound.
Yeah, okay.
And it doesn't always work. Okay, there are things like what you just pointed out that are different about the way they work, and I'm not denying that.
I can't say that neutrons don't come out in waves, but that would be a function of the decay rate of the atoms, not how they travel.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to point out that going forward, like this is sort of trying to get into some of the ideas that we have been developing on the universe and the way we think things could possibly be working. One of the ways we achieve that is by trying to compare them or thinking of them in the outside the box ways, right? And a lot of these things with like the Doppler effect, for example, with sound, the implications of that we can observe this thing going on with sound, this phenomenon, the Doppler effect with sound, and then see the same thing in terms of light tells us something about the two of them. It's easy for us to understand at this point sound, okay, because we have we can zoom in and understand the particles that make up the atmosphere of the air, and it doesn't move nearly as fast. It's way easier for us to clock it and
Right, plus we can look at the things generated. We can get really close and look at the things generating the sound.
Right.
And look at all the relationships there, whereas with light it's a lot harder. If you're looking at something in space, you can't. What is that thing making that light?
right.
And you have to guess based on the light you're seeing. That's it.
Right, and in order to see something that's causing light, before it's light.
Yeah, well, the only way you can see
Can't-
something is with light, too.
That's what I'm saying. Like we're trying to look at like, well, how does light happen? And then so we can't see it because light's not there.
So
yet.
really, with space, we need to be able to get there and hear it. Because with sound, we're like, we want to go over there and look at it. So what we need to do is go listen to these stars and be like, what are they doing?
That's right. So yeah, it's just we need to take a break.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I'm just guessing because the clock is
yeah, it's behind me. Snake break time.
snake break time. And we'll get more into this this strange universe stuff.
Snakes.
Hello.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is hour 2 of episode 12.
Two.
We are Brothers of the Serpent, and we have moved into one of our favorite topics, which is resonance, frequencies, universes, and snakes.
Snake waves.
I can't hear myself at all. What's going on here? Sorry.
Oh shit! I don't know.
And now I know. I had us muted. Fixed. It was a weird space-time anomaly right there. Okay, so I'm going to try to stay in this this topic of frequencies and stuff, but this might be a little bit, a little branch off of it a bit. But this is something I've been thinking about. Just checking, just making sure that's still on. There seems to be a lot of attention paid to resonance in ancient structures. Now, we've talked a lot about various, like the pyramids and the some of the other stuff in Peru and everything, and the like the hypogeum. I think we briefly got into in like episode 5 or 4. Something like that.
Lithophonia.
Yeah, lithophonics. But we haven't really touched on that. So structures will have certain resonant or like reflective properties according to sound. So like one example is if you a lot of the Mayan sort of pyramid whatever they call them, the temples, the temples in ziggurats that have the steps, the real steep steps going up the side. A lot of those Mayan ones down there. If you stand in specific places in front of those and like clap, like make a clapping noise or any other kind of thing, if they, for some reason, the echo comes back and it sounds like an animal, like a particular kind of animal. So if you clap in front of this one pyramid, yeah, it comes back. It's a bird. It's like, it comes back and goes, it's very
freaking awesome.
Right? And it's like, did they do that on purpose? Like, I don't know. Of course, conventional archaeology is like, no, they didn't. But it's really interesting that like you can stand in front of different various of these pyramids and make different sounds that are and get animal sounds that are different. But one of the ones that's always fascinated me is the hypogeum on Malta, because that one is kind of it's rock cut, so it's entirely underground. So whoever built it cut it into the limestone of the island. So down into they just dug it out instead of stacking blocks. They dug this down into it's like a cave, but it's man-made. All the temples and structures on Malta are very round. They're unlike most everywhere else in the world. On Malta, if you go to Google Earth, and I'll put some pictures of this, you can see all the temples on the surface that are made of these humongous, rough, like megaliths. I mean, some of the blocks they're not even blocks. They're just huge, gigantic rocks. Like they look like they peeled them directly up off the limestone ground and just stood it up. And then got another one and stood it up next to it, and they make these crazy temples with no sharp corners. Everything is very round and it's strange. So the hypogeum is the same way. So all the rooms down in there are very round. It's hard to describe, but you can see in the pictures that so there's columns and stuff, but in each room, because everything is round, it's like you start to lose your sense of like how far away is that, right? And because it makes this lensing effect when you're looking at it. It's difficult to tell where everything is, but also because they're round, the what would you call it? The echo, like
The reflective property.
yeah, the reflective properties of it, the way it deals with sound when you're making noise in there is, and I haven't been able to confirm this from, I've read through all this stuff of people talking about being in them, and I mean, it's hard to find this about even the pyramids. Like, what does it sound like when you're standing in one particular room of any of these monuments and you're talking? Now, I've heard Graham Hancock say that when you're in the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid, you cannot speak to people normally. Because if you just start talking normally, it goes, you cannot understand anything anybody says. So to talk to somebody, you actually have to get real close and kind of be quiet. You can't. If you talk normally, it just the room just like starts to echo and reflect the sound around you. You can't understand anything. But they also said that you can hear somebody speaking in the King's Chamber all the way down in the subterranean chamber, which is like 300 meters straight down, plus through a bunch of different rooms into, you know.
So if you're in the subterranean chamber, you can hear someone speaking in the King's Chamber.
Right. You may not be able to understand what they're saying, but you'll hear the noise. You'll hear them.
Cool.
Right. And so I'll have to remember to put like a map of the interior of the Great Pyramid so you can kind of understand, because the subterranean chamber isn't even in the Great Pyramid. It's like it goes down into the
Far below.
Yeah, it goes down below the bottom of the pyramid and down into deep into the rock below it. And it's just this little round room way down there deep in the King's Chamber is all the way up the descending chamber, the descending passage, and then into the ascending passage, and then through the Grand Gallery and up above all that, you know. And so it's like to hear that you can hear somebody talking in the King's Chamber all the way down in this room way down there is just really, that's very strange, you know. And then, but if you're in the Queen's Chamber and somebody's talking, you can't hear shit. You don't hear anything. In the Hypogeum, there's a room called the Egg Room or the Oracle Room, and it is shaped like an egg. It's if you get in there and sit in it, it's like you're sitting inside of an egg where the wide part is down and the narrower part is up, and you're sitting in there, and you can speak normally, and everywhere in the entire Hypogean complex, all 3 levels of it, in all the different rooms, they can hear you like you're standing right next to them.
Yeah. Wow. That's freaking awesome.
And so to get in the egg room, it's like a round hole in the wall, and you kind of crawl through the hole, and then you're in this egg-shaped room, and you're just like, hello, everyone. And everyone in the whole place is like, oh my God, it's God.
Oh my God, it's God.
That's right. I mean, that's
OMG God.
Yeah, OMG God. Shut up. That's how the if you read any of the like conventional archaeology ideas of it, they think that this was a trick that the priests played on, you know. So one priest they would hide this
the Wizard of Oz.
Right. One priest would get in there and he would be like, give us all your money, populace, you know, or whatever they think.
And they might have used it for that at some point.
Yep. Who knows? But it's the ability to do that. I would argue that we couldn't do it. Or if we did, it would require lots of computer computations and shit. You have to build it with a computer assisted. Who's gonna sit down and be like, okay, yeah, just cut it out like this and it'll reflect perfectly?
Yeah, because it's cut out of the rock. Like, how do you? It's like, how do you tune that? If you were gonna build it, you could tune it.
Right, because you can move the blocks around.
And I guess you can tune it if you're cutting it out, but it's like you'd have to be constantly checking everything. Like one guy is like, you know, in some other room on a totally different floor, and he's like with his chisel, and it's like, no, it's not working.
In there, yeah.
Like, stop that guy. Well, what room is he in? I don't know.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing is like while you're in the egg room, you can't hear the people and everywhere. It's a one-way thing. It's very strange. It's like, how is it one way?
So it's like emanating from this egg, but anywhere else it won't make it into it.
Right. Which you would think, if it was that it should be both ways. If I'm sitting in this egg and everyone can hear me out there because of reflective stuff, then I should be able to hear. There should be a return path, but it doesn't work out.
It's like if you're the snail in the shell, do you hear everything else but the ocean? You know what I'm saying?
Mind blown.
From outside the shell, you listen and you hear the ocean.
No, that sound that everyone thinks is the ocean is the sound of the snail's ghost saying, "Put down my fucking shell." Yeah.
I'm just a shadow. I'm just a shadow in the clay.
Yeah. If you'd have put your ear to one of those shadows, you would have heard that. So there's this. That's the there's this focus on resonance within. I mean, even Stonehenge. Like Stonehenge is an open. It is now. I don't know if it's enclosed at any point, but now it's an open structure, and yet there are places like in front of some of the bluestones or whatever, where there's very specific reflective properties, that give you whisper lines and stuff across the complex. Where if you're standing here and some other dude is standing over there, you can be like, hey,
Yes,
scare the hell out of somebody.
we went to a music convention in Houston at the convention center.
Is it Dallas? Or
I'm sure it was Houston. And near the convention center, they had these two benches, concrete benches. And behind each bench was a big stone concrete lens.
Yeah.
Like it was basically a bowl standing on its side.
Yeah, like think of a satellite dish, but
Right.
Yeah.
Concrete satellite dish, big thick stone. What were they, like 8 feet tall or something
they
like
were
that?
huge, yeah.
Basically, when you sit down on the bench, your head is right about where
Close
the
to the
center
middle of it,
of the satellite dish shape is. And then, I don't know how many feet, 100 feet away is another one, and they're faced right at each other. And one person sits on the bench 100 feet away, and the other person sits on this one, and you just
speak normally.
talk like this.
And there's traffic everywhere going all around.
Yeah,
You can hear each other.
You can talk like this, and it sounds like the person is in both of your ears.
Yeah.
Like right there.
And what's interesting is you can intercept, like, so anybody walking in between will hear the conversation, but the people sitting at the lenses cannot hear you speak. So if I walked out there and got in the middle when you and Todd were using it or whatever, and I could hear you guys talking, but I'm like, hey guys, and you guys couldn't hear me. Yeah.
But it's from the middle. It sounds far away.
Right, it does sound far away.
Sounds like they're
and
talking
they're also
far away.
directional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you're sitting on one of the benches, the guy on the other bench, I mean, it sounds like he's in
Yeah.
both of your ears perfectly.
Dude, stop sitting right where I am.
And I'm sure you can imagine, how that works. That's what a satellite dish basically does with radio waves.
Right.
Same deal.
Yeah, or anybody who's had one of those little spy kits that has the freaking reflective dish with the microphone on it. You can put the headphones on and you can hear what people are saying. That's how that works. It just, the dish collects sound.
They're
and focuses
sound
it.
telescopes.
Yeah. It collects sound along the surface of the dish and then reflects it all into a single point in front of it, which if you put a mic there and then mic that to headphones, you can hear
Journey well.
everything you're pointing the dish at. And they do that with lasers now too. You get one that just shoots a laser, so it'll hit a surface. And so if people are on the other side of that wall talking, the laser will pick up the vibrations and you can hear it.
Yeah. It's freaking awesome. Sound traveling at light speed.
Yeah, but you can also hear all the
Via
bugs inside the wall,
transducers.
and you could hear the freaking plumbing and everything. So the ancients, in a lot of these sites, seem to be focused on the sound, and that's not really surprising. It was surprising to me for a long time, but it's not as surprising now because I know a lot more about sacred geometry and the way that they looked at the world through that kind of concept. You can start to see how they would see this as sort of the same thing. As like when you're building a structure out of stone, you're also constructing it in terms of light and sound and
Right.
a bunch of other stuff. I mean, there's one way up in the mountains of Peru. I can't remember the name of it, but it's associated with those gigantic conch shells. There's these humongous fossil conch shells that are found in the mountains up there. And like people use, like the natives there use them to take it and play it like a horn. I'm like, how do you play that thing? Because it's open, but they'll take it and it makes this beautiful dual tone sound that I can't imitate at all because it's two tones, and when they go into this specific temple, yeah, sorry, it's like low. It's like it's a horn, Well, not that low. That's too. Just stop. It's a horn combo, not a piano.
Okay.
But this one guy went into the temple with one of these conch shells and played it, and it was just. And I mean, I'm just listening to it from the recording, and I was like, oh my god, that's amazing. Like it was just amazing. I mean, I can't even imagine what it must sound like to actually be there and hear it. So there's that, but then there's this other way that they seem to pay attention to sound and sound qualities, and that is lithophonia, or lithophonic, when you have the actual stones themselves will ring like bells. So one of the... I'll see if I can find this video. I'm not sure if I'll be able to, but there is a video of one of the Egyptian obelisks. It's not stood up. It isn't still in the quarry. It's complete, but it isn't. It's laying on its side, like still on the... it's on these wooden things, like they were transporting it somewhere, and it's just still there. But it's just laying on its side above the sand, not attached to anything. And I used to have this video, maybe I still have it, of one of the guides. He's an Egyptian there. He wrapped something around his fist, whatever, and he's hitting it. Wham! He's hitting the end of it. It's just this like massive long piece of granite. But when he hits it, it goes boom. And it keeps going and going, and I was like, whoa. You know, and the people that are with me, like, okay, and he gets again, boom. I'm like, that's rock. It's like, okay, so that's lithophonia when a stone will ring like a bell. And I mean, I'm not sure how that works. Like, I mean, do you have any idea? Like, it has to do with crystalline structure, I'm sure. But I mean, we're talking about granite, so it's multiple things in there. But and yet, this pink Aswan granite that they made those obelisks out of apparently will ring.
So from my experience, like I've gotten flint to do this, right? On one of the jobs we were on, I was finding these these big slabs of flint. They were, 4 inches thick, and some of them were huge, just massive slabs. But there were some pieces that were broken into like a bar. Like imagine I don't know if like a xylophone. It looks like a piano, but it's a bunch of wooden blocks.
Yeah,
that are like the keys.
And you play with the sticks with little balls of
yeah,
and
there's these rails that the blocks sit on, right? And the rails have to be positioned just so. So what we were talking about before, where a wave can be, you can divide a wave. Like you have this one wave, and if you divide it right in the center, it will be basically that center that you divide it by will become what they call a node. And the two sides that are equal in length will form their own waves that look exactly like the whole wave did,
Right.
but they're half the size.
right.
So if you divide it in two places, you're going to get 3 waves that are equal in size. So you're dividing it in thirds. So like, I would lay this big piece of flint down on 2 other rocks, and I would shift the rocks. I kept shifting the rocks because this thing isn't symmetrical or perfectly symmetrical, right? So one side's a little bigger than the other, so I have to keep shifting it until I've divided it in thirds based on its mass, really.
Right.
So the big side has to have less sticking out over the end of one of the dividers.
I gotcha.
And once the closer I would get, the longer it would ring when I hit it.
Right. Because it makes the wavelength sustainable.
Right, because if you imagine let's say you took the obelisk into space, where it was just floating, you could hit it, and it would be its fundamental resonant frequency. It would be one wave undulating, back and forth. It can't do that on the ground.
It's got to sit on something.
It has to sit on something. So if it was sitting on one thing, that one thing would have to be right in the center, dividing it equally by its mass, one side to the other, and then you could hit it, and it would be probably, if it was sitting on 2 things, the note you're hearing is 3 times as high as the actual fundamental of the entire obelisk. If it was sitting on one thing, it would be 2 times, it'd be twice as high. But in space, if you could levitate the thing and
or
hit
if you could
it,
hang it from an eye, or something like that, right?
but still, where you're hanging it from the eye, it has to be
from the tip, like hanging it long ways, then you could hit it and the whole thing would shake from that point, right?
Yeah, I guess if you could technically hang it from...
Which you couldn't, because structurally it wouldn't be able to handle it.
Right. I mean, I guess you could drill and put an eye bolt in there and whatever, but it... So a bell kind of works like that, right? The bell has a little ring on the top,
Right.
and it's hanging from that ring, and that ring... then
Stone has
becomes-
almost zero elastic strength.
Yeah, then becomes part of the entire structure of the bell, right?
Yeah.
So you're getting the fundamental of the bell because really its resonance is around a circle that's lateral.
Right.
It's not really...
But think about that.
It's not really resonating
When they
vertically.
stood those obelisks up, they became a ringing structure that had one contact point at the bottom,
That's right.
and it would be an infrasound at that point because it's 2D, it's not divided. You'll never hear them, but they're probably out there ringing all the time.
Except that if the bottom is square, or say, it's got a surface area, right? So that's going to deaden it. So it really like
You probably want to, because otherwise it would be dancing all over the place.
so like the sharper you can imagine like if the obelisk is laying on 2 freaking razor blades,
Right.
the razor blades are sticking up and it's barely then you're going to get longer sustain.
Yeah.
But if it's a 2x4, it's going to deaden a little bit. It's not going to be right at that node, which the node is basically a mathematical point.
Right, has no width, yeah. Okay, so this is the other way that the ancients looked at sonics in their buildings that fascinates me is the fact that some of the stones, and they would go out of their way to quarry stone that had this lithophonic property. So like the blue stones, for Stonehenge, they're in Wales, a quarry 500 miles away from the actual Stonehenge site, but those blue stones ring when you hit them. Okay. I mean, even to this day, you can see when you look at the pictures, you can see on some places on the stones that there's these weird scalloped or worn areas, and that's the place where if you hit it at that spot, it makes a very particular sound. And there's other places where if you hit it down there, it makes a totally different sound.
So that's another factor, where you hit it. So if you say you have the obelisk laying on its side and it's on two supports. If you hit it at the area where one of the supports is, you're not going to get, because that's basically the node, right? You have to hit it. There's a specific place that you can hit it where you will get the best fundamental note. And, and all pianos have this. Like a piano has all these strings and the harp, the big harp. But the arrangement of the heights of the string and where the hammers actually strike them are designed to strike the string in just the right place to where it gets it produces this
Journey well.
the most long-lived note.
Right, and also they take into account to deaden other harmonics. We'll get into that later, but there are basically
when you build a giant harp, there's a lot of complicated shit going on, and if you didn't do it right, you could hit one note, but you'd hear like 10 other ones that were not good.
Yeah, there's harmonics. All through. So if you pluck a string, the tonality of that string, like if it's a very bright sounding note, that means that all these higher harmonics that are actual divisions of the fundamental frequency, they ring. They're in there all the time. So you'll have this ding, like this real bright sound. It's because all of these higher harmonics are ringing out. Well, you could strike it in such a way, like if you imagine a bell and you kind of palm the bell a little bit rather than hitting it with a sharp object. It will have
a muted
sound, right? And so you're muting all these high harmonic resonances that otherwise would be...
That would have short wavelengths that are shorter than your palm.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the way it's struck, so this indentation in the block is probably chosen,
right?
Because that is the place where you're going to get the best, brightest, longest...
or the particular sound they want too. Because like if you think of a tuning,
you can hit it somewhere else and you'll get a high note that's a harmonic.
Right. And they actually have different. It isn't just note that changes the like a lot of the quality. Like you need to listen to some recordings of it because you'll hit it up at the top and it sounds like a flute. It'll go whoo, right? Yeah. And then they'll hit it down below and it sounds more like it goes bow. You know, like there's different stuff in the sound that makes it sound like different instruments. Yeah. You know, so like Stonehenge really is like the first rock band. It's like it's got the bass guitar and the freaking.
And so I'm imagining that the granite. I was thinking of this before, like, you know, it's sitting in the dirt. A lot of it's.
I think it's probably bedrock. I mean, I'm just guessing.
Yeah, probably it could be. And, you know, you need a very rigid structure.
If they were in the dirt, they'd have fallen over a long time ago.
But still, the dirt is touching it, which means it's deadening certain aspects of it. But what I was thinking is that because of the sort of random crystalline structure inside, there could be various different places that you would hit that would resonate parts of it. That the whole body of the stone is conducive to resonance already. So it doesn't have to be the fundamental. Right. In other words, the lowest frequency, the biggest resonance that this thing can produce. That's right. So kind of like a steel drum. Okay, like a steel drum is like this big plate of steel that has dents in it. And the whole blade of steel is pretty homogeneous, right? It's very much the same. Overall, it's the same material and its structure is very similar. But depending on the various dent sizes in the plate of steel,
you can get very different notes.
You can get totally different notes, and they tune the dents. Okay, and that gets into cymatics and all that.
Yeah, tuning dents. So there are a few places. I've found 3 so far. I'm sure there's more, but there are a few places where there is a collection of ringing rocks. Okay, so one of them is Ringing Rocks Park in Ohio, right? No, Pennsylvania. Ringing Rocks Park in Pennsylvania. Now I'll have this thing show us pictures and stuff. And it's basically there's just it seems random, but if you look at the geology of the area, you see that it's a valley. Okay, so there's a valley or whatever. It's in the Pennsylvania hills, whatever. It's a valley, and this collection of ringing rocks, and they're really boulders. They're huge. They're some of them are really large. Most of them are kind of I don't know, like the size of a chair or whatever. But they range anywhere from, the size of small vehicles down to little pebbles of this same of rock, this very specific kind of rock. And they're only in this one spot, and they're up on the wall of the valley. So they're not down in the bottom of the valley, which is where, this is what I'm reading all these geologists talking about it, and they call it a geological anomaly because to them, they're like, it should be in the bottom of the valley. Right? Because that's where stuff collects, where everything rolls down to the bottom of the valley. But here you have this very specific collection of stones that are all exactly the same, that are found nowhere else, anywhere nearby. No one has been able to find out where these come from. So the origin of the Ringing Rocks stones is unknown.
Yeah, I think it was a giant instrument called the lithophone. It's kind of like a music box. So it fell apart. Somebody busted it.
Yeah, so it's up on the wall of the valley. That's the wrong place. It's geologically anomalous and has a mysterious origin. It doesn't belong in it's not indigenous to the area. It is incredibly concentrated. This is one thing they keep pointing out, is that they'll be stacked somewhere anywhere from a few feet all the way up to 10 meters deep in the middle of the area. And it's a rather large spot. Again, you can look at the pictures and see there's just millions of these boulders, and they're in a very tightly collected thing that's very tall. Okay, they're all piled up. All of that is anomalous in terms of when rocks get distributed, they get distributed. They don't get dropped in a single place and then stay there in this tiny, very tight, compacted group. But it's called Ringing Rocks Park because it's interesting when you look at the pictures. You'll see these divots and sort of rounded areas because the natives have been doing this for a long time too. People go there with hammers and walk around and hit the rocks. I've got videos from YouTube, and all you hear is boom, ding, boom, ding, 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 bong. Like people walking around hitting these rocks and finding out which ones ring and which ones don't. And you can usually tell that if you hit a spot that looks like it's kind of been hit a bunch, that spot is going to ring. Keep hitting it. What's interesting is that they all don't ring. Okay, they some of them you hit them and they go fuck. And you're like, find one right next to it. Boom. And I'm watching these. It's hard to do this because these people that are taking videos or pictures, they're not doing science. They're like, look at me at this park with these rocks that ring. Ding! They don't care. I'm trying to see how is that rock set up? Where is it? So they're hitting a boulder and it's ringing, but it's like mostly buried underneath other boulders. And so I know it's being attenuated by things touching it, whatever. And yet it still is ding. I'm like, okay, what? Like the ringing it's. And some geologists do mention this, that the ringing seems to be mostly contained within the structure of the boulders themselves. It doesn't require a lot of outside motion to work. There is some, that's how it gets transmitted to the air, but it will not attenuate as quickly as you think it should because it's half buried in dirt and there's other rocks sitting on it. Yeah. Where you think it should go bong, but it goes ding. Because the internal structure is what continues to resonate. But like I said, they don't all ring, and yet there was a recent study where some college was like, let's go look at this because these people are dumb. So they go out there and they find out that actually all of them do ring. Most of them ring an infrasound. I should say that all of them ring an infrasound. The ones that we think don't ring don't have higher harmonics that we can hear. But every single rock there, when you hit it, rings in this deep infratone. So like you were saying with the harmonics, like what we're hearing when we hit the rocks is actually not the tone of the rock. We're hearing some higher set. And you could kind of tell that once I knew that was true, when I went back and listened to people hitting on it, I could hear that it was a harmonic, because the harmonics have a particular kind of quality that you can tell that there's something else happening that that harmonic might be interacting with that I can't hear, So, given ancient people's sort of love of this kind of stone, and the fact that it's completely geologically anomalous, and they're all very tightly compacted, I'm like, that's a building.
Yeah.
It's just completely crumbled, right? And it must, it like how else did it get there? There's
Yeah, it was like dry laid.
yeah,
You know.
that's right. That was a structure that is now destroyed. There's another one in.
Maybe they were just building. Like this damn building won't quit ringing. It finally fell apart because it was vibrating all
It's
the
like
time.
every time you slam the door, whole place starts ringing and it falls apart.
Oh, holy shit!
So there's another one in Montana that's the same thing. It's like the whole thing I just told you, geologically anomalous, in the wrong place, not in the bottom of the valley, at the top. All that stuff is exactly the same. Infrasound, same. What kept throwing me for a while was that in both places when you go, because they're in parks, so it's Ring Rock Park, wherever. When you go and look at it, both places tell you don't take rocks because they stop ringing once you get them away from the group. And I was like, okay, what? What black magic is this?
This sounds like a ploy to keep people from stealing the ringing rocks.
That's exactly what it is. Because actually,
that's bullshit.
Yeah, because our Aunt Kathleen, who doesn't care about any of that stuff and steals whatever she wants, has one of those rocks. She said they went to visit when they were little kids. She still has it, and she says it rings just fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the parks not wanting people to take their precious freaking rocks when there's billions of them, and no one's carrying off the big ones.
And they're not
Jesus
studying
Christ.
it anymore.
Yeah, right.
They just want your money.
They just don't want you to take any of their fucking rocks because they're theirs. Anyway.
We gotta take a break.
Yeah. Yep. Time for a break. And then when we come back, I'm really gonna talk about snakes. I'm serious because there's like fucking snakes in this place. Gigantic snakes.
Welcome.
I wonder what the resonant quality of a bowling pin is. Maybe there's something really badass about bowling pins. They're like, the sound that they make really cool sounds. But I was just thinking, if you made a hat
Great job,
out of a bowling pin, maybe it does something with its resonant frequency and allows you to do like really cool science.
Yeah, and it opens the bowling pin gate.
Yeah, the serpent gates.
Right.
Snake gate.
Job
Right.
Island.
And that causes the shoulder rivers.
Welcome back, folks. Brothers of the Serpent podcast in our final segment of the final hour.
Sounds very final.
It's very final of episode 12. And there are 12 chromatic notes in the scale. Just so you know, we're talking about sound. We're talking about the way waves move through space in all different forms, through different mediums,
I'm here.
connections and similarities we see between light and sound, and ancient sites, and all of that.
It's basically the same stuff we talk about every time.
Yeah, pretty much. So I wanted to use this piano real quick one more time. We were talking about in the break how three colors,
Back to engine.
red, green, and blue, will make white light. So, what is white light? Right? That's kind of the point of this. White light is like a chord of light frequencies.
Yeah, because I asked, what does harmony sound like in light?
Right. So,
Or, I'm sorry, what does harmony look like in light?
yeah, well, yeah. Yeah. So we were okay. So if you have a surface that's white, and you shine a red, a green, and a blue colored light at the surface, it will reflect back white.
Right. A white surface is reflecting all visible light.
Right.
So if you just shine red, it will reflect the red.
Right.
You'll see a red, see a red
Welcome.
reflection on that, but it will also reflect.
Yeah. If you just shine green, it will reflect green. If you
Right.
just shine blue, it will reflect blue.
Because it's reflecting everything, which actually means it's black.
That's right.
There's no light.
The material is actually the opposite of that.
Right.
It's no light absorbed in the visual spectrum. So we were again looking at this keyboard, our scale here with the colors on it, and
Back
this
to
is
work.
basically what white light sounds like. So that's a chord, 3 notes, and the notes of that scale that I have written up there, instead of C D E F G, is R O Y G C B V.
Right, which is
Welcome.
self-explanatory.
Yeah. Red, green, and blue.
Any musician that comes in here and sees that's gonna be like, what the, what key, what?
So yeah, we were talking about how you can combine colors to get another color. So it turns out that if you play green and blue, and that's the sound it makes. If you were to shine green light and blue light, it would make what?
Great job, Isla.
Cyan. Blue green. If you shine, what is it? What are the other ones? You know light better than me. I know sound.
Yellow and blue makes green,
All right, yellow and blue.
or yellow and cyan, which would make like an aquamarine. Yeah. Red and yellow would make an orange color.
Yeah, so on the keyboard, we could take a picture of it for the thing. Between
can I
red and
do?
yellow is orange. So you're playing the 2 keys on either side of orange. And that would actually be the 2 colors of light that you would shine to get orange, right? Which is there.
Yeah. It's cool. It's like you could. I feel like I can hear the relationship that I think I would see, but it's too confusing to even talk about it.
So anyway, that's just interesting shit.
Why can't I remember what green and blue makes? What was going on here?
I don't know. So Russ did graphic art and he knows all these colors. So I was asking him like, well, what are the blah blah blah? What are the colors? He's like, well, this makes that.
Make brown. Yeah, I don't have brown on there because like green or yellow and green makes brown, and there's no brown. But brown is like a dark red.
Yeah. So yellow and green have this dissonant sound.
Yeah.
That's the third. So the third beat comes in. And maybe that's where you get this
Yeah.
other color. So really, there are 12 notes in the
Blue
chromatic
and red
scale.
make purple.
The chromatic scale. Oh, blue and red. Let's see. Blue.
Far apart. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually
Sorry. Yeah. That's the
That's-
outside of the yeah.
yeah. Cool. And if it's a material that absorbs red and blue, it's going to look green, as we talked about before.
Right.
Those are the notes.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was another little fun fact about the keyboard.
Yeah.
Slight scale thing. In the last segment, we were talking about harmonics, and we're going to go back into this subject of ancient sites and lithophonics. But I brought this guitar in here. I wanted to give you an audio representation of harmonics. So I have this guitar, and the strings of the guitar are suspended between 2 points, right? And it's about the length of an arm, maybe a little shorter. So if I play the strings just open, without pushing anything down, just play them, this is what it sounds like.
What
That
can I
close to
do
the
for
mic
you?
here.
Great
So if
job,
I
Isla.
play that again the same way, but I just barely rest my finger across all the strings right at the midpoint of the string, I will divide the string into equal parts and get an octave higher.
You should really, Tokel.
That's divided in 2. I can divide it at another place to equally divide it into 3.
What have you got?
And
Right.
what's cool about that is he doesn't have to divide it in 2 places to get the
Let's
3
make some
spots.
Right.
Just dividing in that one spot makes the other division happen.
Right.
Things are looking
So that's
up.
divided in 3, divided in 4, which is again an octave higher of the division of 2.
Always a pleasure.
Divided in 5.
Bad, not bad.
It's actually better over here by the sound hole. Ah,
Yeah, that's a hard one to do.
kind of hard to do.
Not bad.
So that's a harmonic. So when I play the fundamental of any note, the tone of that note
Contains all those.
contains all those higher harmonics in them. If I am to touch it
Let's
at
make some
just barely
dust.
touch the string,
You can
at the halfway point, it just divides
silences
the waves. Yeah,
It silences the
fundamental.
fundamental and leaves the harmonics. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm not actually pushing the string down. I'm just barely touching it to stop the vibration at that equally divided. You know, the point that equally divides it.
Yeah, if you think of it like when he hits that string, yeah, when he hits the string, the entire string is flapping back and forth. Okay, that's the fundamental. That one makes the fundamental sound. The whole string is going up and down as one piece, held at these endpoints. But it's also doing it in these division places. Those smaller, shorter areas are also going up and down.
Right.
In each of the divisions, and so when he touches the string in the middle, it silences that big long flapping and
allows the other two
to come out.
Right.
They come out because they're not as strong as the main one.
So that is harmonics. Okay, that's a basic way of trying to describe it for you.
And so so what's interesting about that is all of those notes are contained within the main note, but it's hard for most people. Like I can't hear them. I can tell that they're there because of the quality of the note.
Right. So we describe that as tone. Like a bright note contains a real shiny, a lot of high frequency.
Right.
A dead note, like I can even illustrate.
I'll give him the word.
Dead notes.
So, a bright note, a dead note.
Here.
I don't know if you can tell the difference. Dead note, bright note.
Yeah, okay, I can tell the difference on that one. Yeah.
So, like when you pluck a string with a sharp object, you're going to get a brighter sound because it's a smaller point that you're actually touching the string.
You're not deadening as many of the higher
Right.
harmonics by hitting it in a very tiny spot.
But if you I play it with the whole palm of my hand, it's very dead.
Right. Because it's blocking a lot of the
Many
harmonics
people would
from
just
forming.
recognize that as like, well, it's just quieter. Yes, it is quieter.
Yes, it is because it's almost dead.
Because the addition of all of those higher harmonic resonances adds volume.
Right. Yep.
Anyway, back to rocks.
So, I was basically saying something preposterous, which is that I think that these Ringing Rocks parks are buildings. Yeah, I am. Because I really don't see, and I need to like kind of consult with the geological colleagues. I need to ask some people about this the no geology, but everything I've read so far, the geologists are all like, yeah, this is. They call it a geological anomaly and leave it at that, which to me says that they just don't know what it is. This happens a lot in science. It's really annoying, but they look at something and they're like, we can't explain that within the context of the theories we've got, so we're just gonna leave it and assume that one day it will be explained within the context of the theories we've got, instead of studying it and just looking at it without any context and trying to figure out what's really going on. Which is what you should do is look at it and say, okay, here what's happening. And then how can I explain what's happening within the context of the wider world, but without any kind of paradigm crap going on, so you actually get the real picture. If they can't do that, if they can't put it into the standard model, they just walk away from it, assuming that at some point in the future, someone will plug it into the standard model.
Which usually happens.
Yeah,
They find whatever parts they can plug into the standard model and they publish that.
Right. These specific examples are very difficult though, because like I said, they don't even know where the rocks came from. And looking at this geologically, what you would have to start with is like they were put here, they were deposited here somehow, right? There's ways that rocks can be moved from where they originated from and then deposited somewhere else, like glacial erratics.
It could have been one huge glacial erratic that was hit by a meteor and it blew it into a bunch of keyboard keys.
So the problem is,
but they didn't fly away. They just crumbled right there.
They all flew up into the air and they all landed in the same spot.
Because there's a huge lithomagnet there.
Yeah, so
magnets.
It's very difficult to explain geologically because it's not in the right place. It's not in the origin spot. We don't know where the origin spot is, and if you're looking for origin spots of flood or glacial erratics, the glacial erratics are going to be either, depending on which hemisphere you're in, to the north or to the south. because you assume that the ice is flowing from the pole. If it's a flood, it could be coming in any direction, but it's usually going to be going downhill from somewhere, right? So the water will be moving down. But the water will, a flood can deposit, like the big rock, can deposit something up high on the valley wall, but the big rock is a big rock, not a bunch of small boulders. They're very even looking too. Like when you look at them, you can see that they have very rounded. None of them are sharp, for one thing. Okay, so that implies that whenever they fragmented off from each other, there was a lot of time in between for the sharp edges to be worn off, which implies travel or erosion. Okay, and
They all traveled as a pack.
right. And the fact that they're
Lithophonic stones travel together, Russ.
it's obviously a rock band.
They travel in a chord.
Cracks.
It's a rock.
That's why they're together.
They travel in a Honda Accords.
What? Not a Honda Treaty, or is that the upgraded version?
Chords, you know, they're lithophonic.
Oh, a Honda Accord, of course. That's the cheap version, though.
Yeah.
It's Honda Accords. Crappy. Well, so there's two of these in the United States. There's two of these. The other one's also called Ringing Rocks Park, but it's in Montana or something like that. And it's the same deal. They're all stuck together.
The state is very creative. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm trying to figure out. I'm not getting that one.
Well, the other one's also called Ringing Rocks Park because
The state is in the entity of the state. All right. Yeah, I'm like,
they were real creative.
yeah.
Sorry.
National Park Service is like, oh, Ringing Rocks Park, and they're like, look at these ooh, Ringing Rocks Park, Montana. So what's fascinating though is, so I'm looking for other places. I'm like, are there more of these? I found two in the United States. Okay, I mean, like, there's one in Pennsylvania, and there's one in Montana. I'm like, maybe there's more. So I'm looking around the world, and like, so far I haven't had any luck looking around the world to find similar places. But in Australia, there's this place called Black Mountain. Seems like it should be said that way, but it's not a mountain, but it is black. The rocks in these parks are dark. It's not a mountain though. It is a pile, a massive pile of like this dark rock. It's a huge pile of boulders. Okay, so like the Ringing Rocks Park, they're relatively small. I mean, they're a couple of acres, I guess, and they're maybe 10 feet. This is a mountain-sized pile of these things, and some of them are very large. But overall, when you look at it, it's the same thing. A lot of boulders that are all rounded off, that are all stacked up, that are kind of, when you look at them as a group, you see that they have like gravel. When you look at gravel, you see that they're all kind of sort of the same, right? Some process that broke them up is the same across all of them. They all have this sort of same profile or whatever, and they're very close to being the same size. Black Mountain is made up of humongous things like this, and it is a mountainous pile of these stones. Now the Australian Aborigines that live in that area are terrified of this mountain. It's cursed. It's everything they always say about it. Don't go there. It's they have legends that it's that there's a gigantic, like, I don't know what to call it. It's not. They call it
A rainbow serpent, right?
yeah, but it's not the rainbow serpent. It is a serpentine entity like that, but it's a dark one. It's an evil one, and it retreated from the world when the rest of the original gods did, but it covered over its home with these stones to keep people from getting in it. But this is like a lock or whatever.
So it's not the rainbow serpent.
It's not the rainbow serpent, but it is a serpent entity like the rainbow serpent. Except the rainbow serpent's a good guy. He's like a cultural hero. He started, he's like Inky. And this thing is something like him, but it's not. It's evil.
Because I just was like having my mind blown thinking about this idea, but I guess I'm wrong. I thought they called it the rainbow serpent
There is a rainbow serpent.
at that mountain.
Oh.
But anyway, doesn't really matter. I just
Could be wrong.
It just occurred to me to think of like all of this stuff. I'm comparing sound to light, and then you were talking about the rainbow,
rainbow.
and then like going the other way, like the rainbow of sound would be the same thing. Like we're talking,
Yeah.
we're trying to illustrate colors with sound to show you the relationship between frequencies,
Right.
which is pretty spot on. Okay,
Yeah.
like in terms of you look up the color spectrum and you look at the frequencies, and their correlations are the same as the 7 steps of the scale.
Right.
So you have harmony, you have chords, which is technically a rainbow of sound.
Yeah. I'll have to look at it. Maybe it is the rainbow serpent that's supposed to be in there. I just know that the mountain itself is evil. It's dark. It's like, and it eats people. Like, and you can think of this just purely in terms of, just nothing paranormal. But it's a gigantic pile of boulders. If you go crawling around in there, there's a large chance you're not going to come out because you get into it's. They say it's riddled with caves, but it isn't. They're not caves. There's just like the
gaps
spaces between the boulders.
Yeah.
So you
can't
get in
tell
there,
which way you're
right. You get in there and it's pitch black, and it unlike a cave that will because caves are formed with water, they'll have floors. They may have various like dangerous things like chasms that drop or whatever. But this is just like cracks in rocks, and so it's completely unpredictable, and then extremely easy to get lost. Totally confusing because everything looks the same. There aren't stalactites and it's just these flat plains of this dark granite crap. And like almost everybody that goes into it does not come back out. Like literally, the mountain eats people all the time. There are tons of stories you can go look this up. Maybe I'll put some links in there, but there are plenty of stories that link to just tragedies there. Like an entire tribe of people tried to hide in the mountain. They were at war with some other tribe or whatever, and then the natives tell the story. So they're at war. They're warring with each other, and the whole tribe, like all the men, the women, the children, everything, they go and they hide in Black Mountain overnight to keep the other tribe. And the other tribe is like moving around, hunting them or whatever. And in the morning, no one comes out of the mountain. The whole tribe disappeared. They went in there and tried to hide in it and just never came back out because it's so easy to get lost. And there are more modern stories of like I think he was a sheep herder, and 2 of his sheep had gone up near the mountain, so he went off with his dog to go find them, and he doesn't come back. So then a ranger goes to find him, and that ranger doesn't come back. So then 2 rangers go to find him, and only one of those guys come back, and he is like traumatized and refuses to talk about being inside the mountain. But it took him days to come back out, and he was in a totally different spot, and just like, and people who do go in and do manage to come back out say they talk about weird things like there are these smells, like, so you'll be crawling along and you're basically you're crawling along on the surface of one of these rocks, and you get to the end of it and there's this chasm, and it goes who knows how deep, and there's who knows how many dead things all down in those rocks, and so you get over the chasm and you're like, oh my god, the stench of death is coming up out of it. And also because it's Australia, the difference in temperature between night and day is massive because it's desert in Australia. So they're always shifting around because the stones are expanding and contraction, so that the whole mountain is constantly in motion. And they say that when you get in there, there's groans and creaks and like stuff, like passageways will close behind you, like or crush you. And I mean, it's pretty much like the most terrifying thing you can imagine. But they also have this lithophonic property.
The rainbow serpent.
So
I'm pretty sure that's who it is.
you're probably right. But what I'm saying is, if these 2 Ringing Rock Park places are, if I'm right about this, if these are structures that they've just fallen apart, and like, okay, as far as I've been able to tell, the ones in the United States, no one has kind of bothered to sort of excavate it at all. Like, it's a pile of rocks, what are you digging for? But I'm wondering if you could get in there and sort of start moving the rocks out, if you would start to see that some of the ones in the lower layers actually were placed in a structure, that there would be sort of, you could see floor or wall plans or whatever, you know what I mean? Like you could see foundation stuff, that they were actually laid down purposefully. But as it is now, you can't tell at all. But think of a brick house that's fallen down on itself. It would just look like a rubble of bricks, and if you went and cleared those bricks out, eventually you would get to parts that hadn't completely fallen apart, and you could see that it used to be a structure. No one's bothered to do that with these because they think it's just geology. But
Yeah, the other thing that I think of is
if Black Mountain is a building,
similar to that, or similar to a pile of rocks, all pretty close to being the same shape, in size is like Indian Mound, Midden Mound, where they were burning.
Right.
Now, obviously, there's a lot of dirt in there, but I actually went to a place to dig in this mound that had been pushed by a tractor off the edge of a gully into a stream.
Right.
And so all the dirt, I don't know how long ago it had been done, but all of the dirt had been washed out, and it was just the burn rock. And it looks like what you're saying,
Right. Like a jumble.
brick house that had just crumbled. They're all like very close to the same size and shape.
Yeah.
But it's not because somebody cut them that way. It's because they were doing the same thing with them. They were burning with these larger rocks, and it broke all the larger rocks into basically the same shapes and sizes.
Because it's the same kind of stone, the fracture from the fire.
Yeah.
Was the same. Okay, yeah, gotcha.
So that's like this big collection of rocks, all pretty close to the same size and shape, in a big pile. Not in the proper position, geologically speaking. Being in a place where they shouldn't really be all together in one place. I mean, it just sounds like we're looking at megalith midden.
Yeah.
Megalith midden.
I also started to think like maybe they were making them lithophonic with heat.
They could be, yeah.
So these were giant piles where they were basically like smelting them somehow.
Yeah, and I thought Ringing Rocks Park, the pictures I've seen, look like it's sort of on the side of a hill.
Yeah, it's on the,
So
it's on the,
being
it's on
washed
the wall
out.
of the valley. No, it's like they're laid down, kind of on the slope of a valley on one
Yeah,
side.
so every time it rains there, it can be washing out whatever sediment or dirt
Yes.
could have been in there,
Rinsing it
soot,
out.
ash, whatever.
Yeah.
Strange idea,
But Black Mountain
are there any massive
is
arrowheads around there?
What?
They find any huge arrowheads? Like, this arrowhead's the size of my
They probably
car.
have, and they don't recognize that they're arrowheads because they're too big. It's not there. Like when we were looking at Uluru, the sacred mountain in Australia, and I had the overhead view from Google Earth, and you're like, that's a giant arrowhead. And I was like, holy shit, it is a giant arrowhead. But if Black Mountain is a building, it's immense.
Yeah. It's a mountain building.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where the Tower of Babel is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing is like, if these are buildings, they're not ours. We didn't make them. I mean, all the legends tell us that too. You know, it was not us building them. It was something else. Like the rainbow serpent was not a human,
Right.
that had a snake head and shoulder rivers or whatever. It was something else. They call him ancestor, but when they say that word, they don't mean that they're literally his descendants in terms of genetics. Yeah, the words that the Aborigines use to talk about stuff is very interesting. Like the way they talk about country. Country is something you. It's like they talk about it like it's a person. Country is something you care for. That you love, that you visit. They talk about it like it's a person.
Around here, it's music.
Talk about the country. Country music. Yeah, I wonder what they would think about that. Country music. Do countries play music? So, I don't know really where to go with that, except that that's been my theory on these things, and it's been shot down in every possible way by anybody who has any kind of credits whatsoever. They're like, no, they're not buildings. I'm like, but they could be buildings. No, they're not buildings. But I don't see how they could be anything else. So I just want you guys to think about that, and then you come back and shoot me down.
So, like, on our field trip, when we first found this wall, like I was just looking at this pile of stones that was at the edge of this huge stone slab that we
Yeah.
were walking on, and I'm like, huh. And I look over here and I see more pile of stones,
Will you follow?
and they're all relatively the same size.
Yeah, and you
Close to
look
the same
around
shape.
everywhere else. There's
There's
no
not
stones.
any.
No
And
stones.
so I follow them into the
Step on the
woods,
cracks.
and they keep going, and they're sort of hidden in the trees, and I'm like, it's still a pile of stones, and it's in a straight line. And eventually we follow the pile of stones far enough away from wherever the park was fucking it up.
Yeah.
To where the park wasn't fucking it up, and it's a structure of the same shape and rough, same size of stone in
Right.
this wall, but
fully contiguous with
Yeah.
the pile of stones. Yeah.
Right, but down at the edge, it was just a pile of stones that are roughly the same shape and size.
Right.
So you couldn't say like that's a wall, except that's exactly what I said. That's a wall. It was a wall.
It is, yeah.
And it turned out to be true.
Right.
But,
Yep.
so yeah, you could be right, bro.
And
And all the scriptards could be wrong.
that is extremely low hanging fruit because no one thinks that,
On the cracks.
and no one is digging there. And we probably could just go down there and be like, look at this spaceship. Look at these alien bones, like because no one's looking. They're just down there ringing the rocks.
It's the same deal. We're over there looking at this shit, and it's like they all came here with a waterfall.
Yeah, like, waterfall, woo! We're like, that's an ancient wall. This is a giant cataclysm over here. Huge whirlpools.
volcano underneath this.
That's right. There's a volcano under here. Power classic flows. So the only other topic I had, if you didn't, okay, are we done?
Yeah, we're done.
Damn it.
I know, it went by fast.
Well,
It's the fastest 2 hours in media, folks.
yeah. So the giant snakes I was going to talk about are underneath Black Mountain.
Damn it.
There's huge snakes down there. Yep. So, and there was another topic, but it's kind of contiguous with this stuff, but it's more math and less music. So we'll do that next time. More math, less music. More snakes though.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to send us an email, you can email us at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. But you should actually put comments on the blog.
Yeah.
Which is
brothersoftheserpent.blogspot.com. I think we might have one. I mean, I gotta check. I saw a notice. One.
oh, we have a comment.
I don't know. I
Holy
haven't looked yet.
shit.
I just saw we have a notification. It could be Google saying we're shutting it down.
Probably. Thanks a lot for listening, folks, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, for episode 13. Dun, 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 dun. It's actually good. Oh, whoa! Yeah, that actually scared me. All right,
I'm sorry. I'll delete that.
No, it's cool. No, wait. Thanks to Laura for the intros. Thanks to Smith Sonic Studios for attempting to help. Failing, but attempting.
Okay.
Thanks to everyone who's been supporting us in this. AWAX Productions, Aetherium Studios. That's it.
And all of our listeners. Thanks for
People who've been
subscribing.
calling us up and be like, guys, you suck, but do more.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's great.
I keep calling them followers. They're not followers.
Not followers yet. Subscribers.
Subscribers of the Serpents. Snakes.